Yes, when I was 11, they took a big trip to Europe, and I stayed with my brother and sister-in-law. And, that had an influence on me, too. They didn't take me, and I was very upset that they didn't. But it gave me a huge travel bug. Again, I used to look at their pictures, and, that had a profound influence on me. What more led to my success as an administrator was my people skills, which came from my mother. When I had... when they did a party for me in my 20th anniversary as director. And my mother was in the audience, and at that time was actually wearing a device that it was constantly inserting chemo into her. That was when she had esophageal cancer. So I knew that, things were not looking good. And I remember when I gave my thank you speech saying, everything I've done well is due to my mother. So, of course, that was very moving to her. But I do think it's the people skills that come from her.
Do you feel that you learned how to deal with someone difficult through interaction with your father? Or was he not that tough?
That's a good point, actually. I think I did learn how to deal with difficult people from dealing with him and seeing my mother deal with him. I guess I always had leadership qualities. In high school, I was president of my class a couple times, and had to deal with, difficult people, difficult nuns, in high school. And so I learned how to be diplomatic.
And the skills came.
And those skills obviously served me well in my career as an administrator. My father died on Labor Day of 1972. I had graduated from Tufts, and I was beginning at University of Pennsylvania's School of Social Work. That whole social conscience that came from going to college from 68 to 72 made me want to make a difference, and that was why I was going to social work school. And he moved me in that day. My father moved me into a dorm at Penn, and he died during the night. So there was some feeling that expenditure of energy, of moving, affected his heart. I mean, he was, those were the days they didn't have the cures they have for heart disease. They didn't have angioplasty and bypass and all that. So he had a heart attack and died in his sleep. So that had a profound effect on me.
Did you feel guilty?
I moved out of the dorm at Penn to be home with my mother and started social work school. And it was a very hard time because, not only losing my father at 21, but my mother was not in good shape. And, I remember at one point saying to her, it's bad enough that I've lost my father, but I've lost you too. You're not the same person.
She was that bad at first?
At first. And that actually helped her to snap out of it and to go on to live, many years and focus on the positive. But it was a shock. She was in her 50s, well, like your mother. And there was no warning. He died in his sleep. So I was dealing with her. No. So social work school at that time, and that approach at Penn, was very intense. They wanted you to go through what your patients were going through. And, it was a time when we were facing, we're still facing racism. But it was half the class was black, half was white. We had a lot of racial conversations. People cried all the time. It was a difficult time. And then my placement was at the hospital where my father had been treated. I was working with pregnant adolescents. Anyway, it was all too much for me emotionally. So I left social work school. And
were you there?
a semester. even less than a semester.
You didn't finish a semester?
No, less than, I think I left in November. And my brother said to me, why don't you do something that makes you happy? You know, look at your mother. You know, you don't have to be miserable in your career. Do something that makes you happy.
Meaning your mother's happy.
Yes. So I was 12 when I became an aunt, and I always loved my nieces and nephews. And so I thought, well, that's what I should do. So you all, the three of you, had gone to Montessori school, and I decided I would take the Montessori training. And actually, Richard was going to the school at the same time, and I remember I took him to school the very first day he was going. This is an aside, but it's just a cute story. And he was going to take a bus home. And when I dropped him off, he said to me, "But how will I find the bus?" And I was a wreck all day, and he was upset.
That's horrible. That's great.
Anyway,
You
so
went and picked him up?
no, because I had to stay in school. He was getting out earlier than I was. I was taking the Montessori training at Ravenhill, and he was going to school there. So I did the Montessori training, and at that point, I went to Teachers College, Columbia. Well, no, I started working in Delran, New Jersey, where I taught in a Montessori school for 2 years. And the second year, I think it was actually the summer between the 2 years, I went to Teachers College, Columbia. I just took a couple courses, non-degree. And I met Leslie Williams, who convinced me to sign up for the master's program. And I went into New York once a week while I was teaching in New Jersey and living at home. And I would stay with Karen that night and come back early in the morning to teach in New Jersey near Philadelphia. And then at the end of, at some point during that year, I decided I had been with my mother, I think, for 5 years, and that it was time for me to go off on my own. So I moved to New York and enrolled full-time in the master's program at TC and lived with Karen. Did a year at Teachers College, and then when I finished the master's, I started working at Brick. And I have to say, a lot of my life is, a lot of the things that happened to me that propelled my career happened by chance. It's not like I set out, that I kept having things in mind. So Brick was where I got a teaching job. And I had really wanted to teach in a Montessori school, but there really weren't any. There was like 2 in New York. And
Montessori is a certain philosophy.
It's a philosophy, yes.
And you got it.
And Leslie Williams, who was my advisor, encouraged me to keep going. So while I was teaching at Brick, I did my MED, which is a higher level master's. So I did another master's, and then she convinced me to enroll in the doctoral program. And again, she showed faith in me. I liked being a student, and so I enrolled in the doctoral program. And then I met your father. Not your father, my husband. I met Walter. And I met him while I was teaching at Brick. I had finished 1 year teaching at Brick, and I guess I had finished my MED and enrolled in the doctoral program. And I met him in the fall of that year. And he went back to Italy, and we started writing letters. And then I went to see him my spring break, and he came in May. I went for the summer, and I stayed. We had decided we would get married. He would keep trying to come back to the U.S. He got accepted into a doctoral program at Columbia. We went back to the U.S. I went back to Brick as a teacher. And so for those 4.5 years, he was in a doctoral program. I was teaching at Brick. And then the director announced that she was leaving. And I hadn't set out thinking I wanted to be a director. But I started thinking about, well, who's going to be the new director? And will I learn anything from her? I thought, well, maybe I should apply. So I kind of applied as a whim. And I remember saying to one of my colleagues, gee, they could give me this job, then what am I going to do? They did give me the job. And at first I was very shy, uncomfortable speaking in public, and, I really had to overcome that. I would rehearse. I was driving from New Jersey at that point, and if I had a speech to give, I would tape it and listen to it on the car ride to rehearse it so I would get more comfortable. I would get really anxious when I had to speak in public. The year that I lived in Italy with Walter, this is interesting just from the technology point of view.
1 year in Italy.
1 year in Italy.
Were you working then or just?
I worked part-time at the American School of Milan, and part-time I was studying, and I was in a doctoral seminar, and Leslie Williams, again, who was so kind, let me take the seminar remotely, which meant she cassette taped the classes and mailed them to me. And I cassette taped my presentations and mailed them back to her.
So we're talking, what year? Is this the 80s, 90s?
This is 1978.
Oh, so this is 78. So there was remote studying, and it wasn't being tapped in online. It was videoing.
It was very, very unusual. She was just an extremely kind, supportive person. If you work towards something slowly, it doesn't matter how long it takes, because then you get it and you're done. And you're still working. So you can do it slowly. It really, you're working towards something. You get something at the end. I was clearly someone who got involved in things beyond just the school. So I was asked to be on the board of the Admissions Association of Greater New York. And that was a venue of being known in the city. And I did that for many years. Then,
and what is it called again?
It's called ISAGNY. It's the Independent School Admissions Association of Greater New York. So I pretty much got a name for myself in this city through that. In the independent school world.
So wait a minute, and what is that? What were the duties of that? What was that? What did that mean?
Oh, it's helping the whole admissions process to be better in the city for families. Okay. But this is a rarefied world, okay?
Yeah.
I always believed that early childhood schools are schools. They're not preschools. They can be judged by the same standards as the school for older kids. So I had Brick join the New York State Association of Independent Schools in 1990. And we were the second early childhood school in the state to do that.
Did you set a standard by doing that? Did others
Yes. And I was an early childhood person with a doctorate. And so they also viewed me as a spokesperson for early childhood education. And as NYSACE wanted more early childhood schools to join, they would often ask me to do things. So I joined, first served on accrediting teams. Early child, independent schools get accredited through their state independent school organization. So I served on teams where we went and visited other schools, and then I was asked to join the Accreditation Commission.
So your accomplishments weren't just with the school, they actually was with the industry, really. You were.
Well, yeah, and my goal all through my career was to professionalize early childhood education. And as time went on, what I always believed became proven by research, that the early childhood years are the years of most rapid brain development. It's when you can make the biggest impact educationally.
So you were...
There was a Nobel Prize economist named Heckman who did a study of, well, he didn't actually do a study. He used research from a longitudinal study done in Michigan to prove that early childhood education is the best economic investment a country can make, because it has the longest term payoff, if you're talking about poor kids, of, you know, less winding up in jail, more working. So his point was, this should be an economic investment. It's not just a moral thing. It's an economic investment for a society. And, you know, that's been really nice to see. So now New York City has public pre-K, and, you know, Obama talked about it too, of course, in this administration. Yeah, so either early childhood was either for very poor kids or for people who could pay for independent schools. So it's only been, you know, in recent years that it's becoming public. In this country, in Western Europe, it's been free for a long time, but, you know, we're always backwards in these things in this country. I was on the NYSACE Accreditation Commission, and independent schools respected me as an early childhood person. I was the only early childhood person on that group. I was one of the early ones. And I did a good job on the accreditations I did, so they put me on the commission. Then I started a conference. I was also on the Professional Development Committee of NYSACE, and I started a conference for early childhood directors and lower school heads, because I felt that those two groups needed to get to know each other better, because there's tremendous competition to get into those ongoing schools, and I felt like we would lessen the competition if the educators knew each other better. And so I started that conference, which continues. And then when I turned 60, you know, as I said, working at BRIC was sort of coincidence. It was the job that I got. But I still had that social conscience from my college years of 68 to 72. Always felt a little bit guilty that I wasn't working with poor kids. And, you know, we gave, one of the things that I did at BRIC was to greatly increase the financial aid over the years. So, you know, we had the best financial aid for an early childhood school in the city. But, you know, I started thinking about my legacy when I turned 60, and I started a summer program for low-income kids at BRIC. And at first I thought about it, and then I thought, well, this is just going to be a drop in the bucket unless I connect it. So I made it for kids who were entering low-income kids who were entering independent school kindergarten or applying, to give them a boost before they entered. So they would get used to the independent school world. They would have 5 weeks of, you know, both learning and social learning. And I have weekly meetings for parents to help them to adjust to independent schools as well. So that's been a wonderful legacy. In New York City, there are 26 ongoing schools who contribute $5,000 a year as partners to help to sustain that. I started a program to help kids to be successful in independent schools. The same year, the pastors at BRIC came to me and told me about this Liberian gentleman who grew up very poor in Liberia, West Africa, and through a series of circumstances came to the States and got a degree here. and that he wanted to start a school in Liberia for kids like him who were very poor and didn't have an education. And the pastors asked me to help. So I did. And the African Dream Academy opened in September of 2012 with 144 children in grades nursery through 4th grade, and now has around 800 children in grades nursery through 11th grade. And next year we'll have 12th grade.
Amazing.
There's about 800 in the whole school.
Great.
This school also has a vocational school for parents. So after the kids leave, they come in and they learn computer skills and sewing and catering and, things like that, so they can earn a living. And then one of the BRIC parents, after it was established, had wanted to open a clinic in Africa, so he supported a health clinic. So, and, Liberia is one of the poorest countries in the world. So,
Are you a board member that's raising money to keep this going?
I'm the president of the board.
And how much does it take to keep this going, this school funded?
About $250,000 a year. So yes, I raise money. But I also go there and I do teacher training, and, I advise the director and, all that kind of thing. So now that I'm retired from BRIC, I continue to do that. I continue to do the summer program for low-income kids. I'm also president of the board of an organization in New York called Early Steps, which helps to place children of color in independent school kindergartens. I'm busy also in my church. I'm an elder, and elder means a member of the session, which is the governing body of the church.
What denomination?
It's Presbyterian. So that's what keeps me busy now. Yes. So when I retired from BRIC, they put up a plaque in the garden, which thanks me for my years of service as a teacher and a director.